One thing I forgot to mention in my opening statement is that when a school district is failing, I think it's essential to implement other types of education, such as charter schools. Now, I think charter schools are great because they use less funding and they're more efficient. Now, with funding cuts, these would be great because they use less funding, and you can bring in other professionals that students are interested in to teach them about the careers that they want to pursue. Now, the cost of college has gone up over $2,000 per year since Obama has taken office. I agree with Pell Grants, and I think they're great to give low-income people, people under the poverty line, a chance to go to college. The problem is that easy availability of federal grants drives up the cost of college, and for everyone, and it turns it into an entitlement system. Now, don't get me wrong. I think everyone should have the option to go to college, and I think it's great. But there's other things out there, such as trade schools, community college, and training programs that can get these people to work.
Well, if you want to make college more affordable, one way that we thought of doing it is to tax campaign spending. So this election season, $7 billion have been spent on this election alone. And so we're proposing a 10% tax on election spending. And that would create $700 million that we could use for scholarships to pay for lower income students. And in Alabama alone, that would be $2.5 million going towards scholarships for Alabama students. And so that money would be taxed for campaign spending by political campaigns, also by tax and super PACs. So that's one way that we can help students pay for college. And speaking of charter schools, Mitt Romney has proposed voucher systems that can be used for public schools, for lower income students to go to public schools in other districts, or for private schools. But he hasn't given any details on how this would be funded, how it would work. I mean, there's a lot of different details that go into it that he hasn't specified anything about. So that's something we need to have a discussion about.
Well, I think with charter schools, you can just look to New Orleans, Louisiana. After Hurricane Katrina hit, they implemented a complete charter school program in their city. And it has been one of the most successful school districts in the country, by far. This has also lowered the cost of education in New Orleans, and it has made for a more it has made it easier for students to be educated, and more students are going to college now in New Orleans because of charter schools.
Democrats aren't against charter schools. In fact, in Race to the Top, Barack Obama said that you would be unlikely to win federal funding if you didn't have a certain number of charter schools in your school or in your state. And Race to the Top, if you don't know, is a program that allowed states to opt out of No Child Left Behind, which is a failing program. And it allows them to adopt higher standards in return for more federal money. And so in that program, states competed for federal money, and it promoted school turnarounds, better teacher evaluations, and charter schools. 33 states participated, and it was a huge success.
What direction does the nation need to go to grow its energy reform? 2 minutes.
Well, the first thing we need to do is to have an all-of-the-above energy approach. So that means oil, gas, wind, coal, solar, nuclear, biofuels, coal, all of it. We need to do all of it. And Obama knows that there's not a quick fix toward energy. You can't just drill your way towards lower gas prices. It's a much more complicated problem than that. We need to ensure that 25% of our electricity comes from renewable resources. And so President Obama has invested $150 billion over the next 10 years that will be invested to help spur private efforts to build a clean energy future. And how Obama is going to do this? Well, Mitt Romney has proposed just to increase production, but not to decrease demand. And Obama wants to do both. He wants to not only increase production, but also decrease demand. And so how he's proposing to do that is to implement new fuel economy standards so that the average the fleet for a company, the average miles per gallon has to be 55 miles per gallon. And so that is going to demand will go down, so prices will also go down. That's how supply and demand works. And he would also, another way that he would do this is to make a new $7,000 tax credit for purchasing advanced and fuel-efficient cars. So that's one of the ways that he wants to have an all-of-the-above approach. And Mitt Romney, he says that he's for all the different kinds of energy, but in his budget it doesn't reflect that. In his plans it doesn't reflect that. He doesn't have specifics that Barack Obama plans to do this.
my opponent said, President Obama claims to have an all-the-above approach. But in 2008, he told voters that in a press conference that coal industries would go bankrupt because of all the regulations and fees that the EPA would be enforcing, which he was supportive of. Coal industries have been crippled over the last 4 years due to the addition of these regulations and fees. More than 200 coal-based industries have shut down, which threatens 1.5 million American jobs in especially the swing states, Ohio, Virginia, Pennsylvania. President Obama has backed off of these regulations and fees due to this. I believe, and also coal produces 49% of America's energy, and so why not promote that? Why not promote the jobs in that area? We need to empower states for onshore development, which equals competition, which equals economy stimulators. I believe that we should open offshore energy development for oil rigs. We should take into account the Alaskan oil rigs that we are not taking advantage of at all. They're just sitting there. We need to reopen the Gulf Coast oil rigs that were shut down after the BP oil spill. We need to open the oil rigs in the Carolinas and in Virginia. And speaking of oil on American soil, North Dakota, they have an oil rig that is in full effect, and they have the lowest unemployment rate in the entire country, and that's 3%. And it is private land and not public land. President Obama has taken the responsibility of all of the oil production and gas production, but it is not public land, which that's the only thing that he has anything to do with. He does not have anything to do with private land, but on oil and gas production. I believe that we need to push the North American Energy Partnership by opening the Keystone Pipeline and promoting the Canadian and Mexican connections with energy. And I just want to keep this. I know we're all students and we're all paying for gas in this hard time. President Obama, when he entered office, the gas cost $1.89. It is now $3.29 in the state of Alabama.
Okay, well, speaking of coal, the Republicans have been saying lately that there's a war on coal, and that is just not true. Obama is not against coal. Coal is not a very good way to power the country sustainably, but we know that we need it right now. We know that there aren't a lot of other options, but that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to fund other options. So we're funding research for other options instead of relying on coal permanently, which it's just not a good solution. The pollution and everything, it's just we can't continue doing what we've been doing. So we know that we need coal, but at this moment we're still relying on it. And that's why President Obama has funded research to find cleaner ways to make coal, to use coal. So that would be capturing and storing the carbon that's released when you burn coal. So he's funded 22 different projects across 4 areas for carbon capture and sequestration research. And that was part of the Recovery Act that President Obama passed. And that substantially invested in research for cleaner coal. And since you brought up the Keystone Pipeline, if you don't know, that was a pipeline.
Speaking of green energy, Solyndra, as many of you have heard, it went bankrupt. $535 million of our tax money went to this, and it was to produce green energy, but in my opinion, it was just to keep up with China and their production. And basically what it was, it made solar panels to make energy, and solar panels make up 0.03% of all of our energy. That's how much we get from that. And then nuclear energy, 21%. Natural gas, 18%.
Okay, well, back to gas prices, what you said about them. The reason that they were low when President Barack Obama took office was because the economy was doing terribly and demand was down because of that. All around the world, demand was down, so prices were down. And now the economy is doing better, so prices have risen. That's just how it works. It's not because Obama did anything to make gas prices rise. And back to the Keystone Pipeline, if you don't know, that was a pipeline from Canada to Texas that would have been extremely detrimental to the environment. It would have hurt farmland that was there, contaminated the water, and Republicans have been saying that it would create millions of jobs when in reality it would only create 6,000 to 10,000 jobs. And
that 6 to 10,000 jobs is more than zero. And I also believe that the economy is still not doing as well as it should be or could be. And I believe that gas prices will lower if we take out the Middle East and take advantage of what we can do on our soil, on federal land. And I think that we should let supply and demand and private entrepreneurs regulate the energy economy rather than the government.
My question of the night, Chandler, goes to you. What reforms or changes must be put into the welfare system? 2 minutes.
Welfare, serving its purpose, allows people to move forward, but it also hinders people by making them simply just depend on the government. And therefore, entitlements become enslavements rather than pushing them forward, and it's a never-ending cycle unless the people that are on these welfare programs take the initiative to do what is necessary to be a respectable citizen and to contribute to society. And the centerpiece of the 1996 legislation, the temporary assistance for needy families, work requirements were established and time-limited benefits were set for recipients on welfare. When President Obama stepped into office, these were taken away. The number of people on welfare has increased from 32 million to 47 million since President Obama has taken office. And 23 million are unemployed or underemployed. And if I had the opportunity to reform the welfare program, I would transform unemployment to a job training program, such as community service, that would allow people on these programs a temporary job to make them more apt to get hired whenever they go out into the real world and try to find a job. I believe that I would block grant federal welfare funds to the state and privatize it because the state is who knows its citizens best, correct? I think we should limit the amount of time on welfare to 10 months, which would motivate the citizens on welfare to go out and do it as quick as possible, find a job, and contribute to society as quick as possible. And some Republicans may even argue that this is too much government in their private lives, but I believe that if we want to compromise, that this is a great way for us to all come together and compromise on that level. And these limitations would all motivate citizens to contribute to society as a whole and fulfill the whole meaning of being on welfare. I know that there are several people that have come out of welfare with $1 million businesses that they are CEOs of, and that's what welfare is all about.